It may be difficult to hear, but this is the truth. Men are not addicted to love, nor to beauty, nor even to the warmth of affection. They are addicted to what they cannot grasp. The deeper a man reaches into the abyss of a woman's silence, the more his soul claws against the void of her unknowability. What binds him is not her presence, but the haunting shadow of her absence. And it is here, within the realm of feminine mystique, that the raw psychology of obsession is born. A woman who masters silence walks as a living archetype, one step removed from the mundane, untouchable by the desperate pull of validation. Jung would call her anima incarnate, the dreamlike figure men seek in every corner of their unconscious. Her very stillness calls forth projection, the man casting upon her the weight of his fantasies, his wounds, his longing for redemption. He does not see the woman as she is. He sees his own shadow, dressed in the robes of her mystery. And the deeper her silence, the stronger the grip of his projection. This is why a woman's power is not found in the noise of justification or the desperation of proving her worth. Her power is in the quiet refusal to explain, in the cold beauty of detachment, in the refusal to dance for a crown already her own. When she withdraws, she mirrors back to the man his own emptiness. He feels the wound of abandonment, the echo of his boyhood fears, the shattering recognition that he does not own her. The silence forces him into confrontation with himself. And this confrontation is unbearable. But hear this truth: silence is not passivity. It is not weakness nor surrender. It is an active weapon, a scalpel cutting through the illusions of control. A man, when faced with a woman's mystery, loses the comfort of certainty. He oscillates between craving and resentment, desire and fear. He is caught in the ancient paradox. He wants to possess what cannot be possessed. And the more he fails, the deeper his addiction grows. You, listening now, understand this. If you give away every thought, if you explain your every move, if you seek to calm his anxieties with constant presence, you rob him of the very fire that makes him desire you. You hand him certainty, and certainty is death to attraction. What keeps him awake at night is not the memory of your words, but the riddle of your silence. He does not stay bound because you fed his hunger, but because you left him hungry. The Stoics knew the value of this restraint. Marcus Aurelius wrote of the dignity found in stillness, of the strength in self-command. A woman who does not rush to fill the silence with reassurance is the woman who commands herself. She does not tremble under the weight of his questions. She knows that her sovereignty is not built on his peace of mind, but on her unshakable core. In silence, she is unmovable, and in that immovability lies the essence of power. Consider the cycles of obsession. Every man carries within him the ghost of the mother, the anima figure of his unconscious. When he encounters a woman who holds herself in sovereign mystery, he collides again with that primal wound, the desire to merge with the source and the simultaneous terror of separation. He longs to dissolve into her, yet fears the annihilation of his ego. This paradox traps him, a cage without bars, a hunger without satisfaction. And the more he tastes her silence, the more it burns into his psyche. There are women who misunderstand this, who believe their power lies in the drama of noise, in constant reminders, in chasing after answers. But those who live in the depth of shadow know otherwise. They know that silence is not emptiness, it is a mirror. Every man who gazes into it sees his own soul reflected back, magnified and distorted by his projections. And because most men fear their own shadows, they cling tighter to the woman who reveals it, hoping her presence will soothe what only his inner work can heal. You may think this cruel, to let him wander in the labyrinth of his projections while you stand still, sovereign, detached. But cruelty is not the right word. It is truth. For every woman who has surrendered her soul to please, who has bled herself dry in endless explanation, knows the bitterness of being taken for granted. It is not silence that wounds, it is the absence of boundaries that destroys. Silence is not abandonment. It is the line drawn in fire, the reminder that sovereignty is never given away. So hear this and let it burn into your being. A man's addiction is not to your body, nor to your kindness, nor even to your love. His addiction is to the unknowable essence that you guard within your silence. When you stop trying to be understood, when you stop begging to be seen, you transform into the one thing he cannot conquer, the mystery that devours his certainty. And in that transformation, you rise from the shadows as sovereign. A man believes he wants transparency, but his soul trembles at the raw force of it. What he truly craves is the veil, the hidden chamber of feminine essence that cannot be mapped, cannot be decoded. His body may chase warmth, but his psyche, his shadow, hungers for the unattainable. And it is this paradox that chains him, not with bonds of flesh, but with threads of psyche spun tighter than iron. Carl Jung spoke of the anima as the inner feminine that lives within every man, shaping his dreams, his desires, his obsessions. When he meets a woman who embodies mystique, she becomes a living mirror of that anima, the projection of his unhealed longing. He thinks he is drawn to her, but in truth, he is drawn to himself, the fragmented, hidden parts of his own psyche, dressed in her silence. She awakens in him both the ecstasy of pursuit and the despair of never fully arriving. This is why he circles her like a planet around a dark sun, unable to escape the orbit of her gravity. And here is the truth that most will never dare to face. Obsession is not born of abundance, but of lack. It is the spaces she withholds that create the hunger. A woman who understands this does not rush to fill every void with chatter, reassurance, or exposure. She knows that to over-explain is to rob the man of his wound, to soothe away the very fire that keeps him bound. You who listen, have been taught to give, to please, to keep no secrets. You have been told that love is openness, that devotion is measured in transparency. But this teaching has stripped many women of their sovereignty, leaving them hollowed by a constant need to justify themselves. And yet, the women who turn inward, who keep a part of themselves untouched, who allow their silence to linger like a ghost, those are the women men cannot forget. In silence, a woman steps beyond the reach of ordinary time. She becomes myth. Men do not dream of the woman who explained herself away. They dream of the one who remained elusive, whose presence left more questions than answers. This is the psychology of memory and obsession. The unfinished story is the one that never fades. The Stoics taught mastery over one's inner world, and in this mastery lies the root of feminine dominance. Seneca warned against squandering energy on things beyond control. A woman who embodies Stoic silence does not fight for power over a man, she exerts power over herself. She does not tremble at the thought of his wandering gaze. She does not collapse in fear when his attention flickers. Her silence proclaims, "You may seek me, but you cannot move me." And in that unyielding presence, she becomes unforgettable. But the shadow speaks here as well. A man addicted to feminine mystique is not merely in love. He is ensnared in his own projections. He is chasing the fragment of himself that she reflects. This is dangerous ground, for obsession can twist into resentment. When his hunger deepens and is left unsatisfied, he may seek to punish, to control, to force answers from her silence. Yet the paradox remains. The more he demands, the less he possesses. The more he tries to break the veil, the thicker the veil becomes. You must understand this danger. Your silence is not for his torment, it is for your sovereignty. It is not a game of cruelty, but a reclamation of power. In a world that trains women to give endlessly, silence is rebellion. And rebellion, clothed in elegance, becomes a lure. Think of the mythic feminine, the sirens whose song lured sailors into madness, not by volume but by mystery. Think of Persephone, whose half-life in the underworld made her untouchable to both gods and men. Think of the dark queens of history, remembered not for endless confessions, but for the secrets they carried to their graves. These are not merely stories, they are archetypal truths. They remind us that the feminine mystique is not weakness, it is dominion. So what does this mean for you? It means that your silence must be chosen, not accidental. It must rise not from fear, but from power. If you withdraw in weakness, you crumble. But if you withdraw in sovereignty, you reign. The man addicted to your mystery will circle, return, and circle again because he is not chasing you. he is chasing himself through you. And you, detached, watch with cold grace, knowing his hunger cannot devour what you refuse to surrender. Let this truth settle into your bones. The most dangerous woman is not the one who seduces with constant words, but the one who leaves room for a man's shadow to consume him. Silence is the echo that never fades. Mystery is the flame that never burns out. In every age, men have told stories of the elusive woman. Not the one who gave herself freely, nor the one who spoke her heart without reserve, but the one who remained shrouded, whose eyes promised worlds yet unopened, whose silence whispered louder than words. She is remembered, not because she was understood, but because she was never fully known. This is the paradox of feminine power. What is revealed fades, but what is held endures. Jung understood this tension in the psyche. The anima, that inner feminine archetype, is never fully visible to a man's conscious mind. She slips between forms, sometimes goddess, sometimes temptress, sometimes savior. And every woman who masters mystery mirrors this archetype. She awakens in him the restless hunger of projection, and because he cannot anchor her essence, he remains bound. It is not her body that enslaves him, nor her kindness, but the eternal question she embodies. Who is she when she withdraws? Addiction begins here, in the gap between what he thinks he knows and what remains untouched. His mind gnaws at the silence, circling the void, unable to escape. And because the psyche abhors incompletion, his longing intensifies. It is the same mechanism that makes unfinished stories immortal, the same force that leaves broken patterns unresolved. A woman who leaves space, who carries silence like a weapon, becomes not merely a presence in his life, but a haunting. You who listen understand the weight of this. If you rush to fill every silence, you rob yourself of power. If you unfold every secret, you flatten your myth into mere flesh. If you live only to be understood, you erase the very essence that makes you unforgettable. Men do not crave what they understand. They crave what unsettles them, what awakens the shadow they cannot tame. The Stoics knew this form of strength. Epictetus taught that control lies not in the world, but in the self. A woman who embodies silence lives this truth. She does not chase clarity in his eyes, nor does she beg to be defined by his words. She remains sovereign, unshaken, detached. And in her detachment, she reflects back to him the instability of his own soul. He feels weak before her not because she dominates him outwardly, but because her stillness exposes his lack of control inwardly. And yet this silence is not absence, it is presence magnified. To withhold words is not to vanish, it is to amplify the gravity of one's being. Consider the woman who speaks sparingly. Each word lands heavier, each glance burns deeper, each movement lingers longer. Her silence is not emptiness, but density. A man feels the weight of her essence not in what she gives, but in what she refuses to yield. But there is a darker layer here. The man addicted to feminine mystique does not only chase the woman before him, he chases the ghost of every wound within him. Her silence awakens the echo of abandonment, the childhood ache of being unseen, the terror of being insignificant. He seeks in her the mother's gaze he once lost, the soothing presence he was denied. Her refusal to give it binds him tighter, because his hunger is bottomless. He does not only want her, he wants the impossible restoration of his fractured self, and in chasing it, he burns. You must see the danger and the power interwoven. To embody silence without sovereignty is to fall into manipulation, to provoke wounds without meaning. But to embody silence from power is to remind him, you are not his savior, not his mother, not his possession. You are the sovereign gatekeeper of your own mystery. His hunger belongs to him, not to you. His shadow is his to confront, not yours to heal. This is the cold beauty of shadow integration. You no longer exist to soothe the fragile egos of men. You no longer bleed yourself to make them whole. You understand that their addiction is not a reflection of your worth, but of their unhealed fracture. And in this knowledge, you stand taller, sharper, untouchable. Think of the Empress archetype, the sovereign who sits upon her throne, unmoved by the storms of men. She does not scream to prove her dominance, nor does she chase to preserve loyalty. Her silence is decree. Her detachment is law. And in that immovability, men circle her like moths to an eternal flame, knowing they will burn, yet unable to resist. So take this truth with you. Silence is not absence. Mystery is not weakness. Detachment is not coldness. These are weapons of sovereignty, sharpened in shadow, carried with elegance. When you wield them, men do not forget you, for you become the mirror of their deepest hunger, the echo of their unresolved wounds, the ghost that lingers when all others fade. A man's greatest terror is not rejection, it is irrelevance. To be ignored is to be erased from the stage of another's psyche. And silence, when wielded by a sovereign woman, delivers this terror with surgical precision. It does not scream, it does not fight, it does not plead. It simply withdraws, leaving him alone with the echo of himself. And in that echo, he hears the hollowness he has tried to bury beneath conquest, validation, and control. This is the essence of dark feminine power. She does not conquer by force, she conquers by absence. The void she creates is unbearable to him because it demands that he confront the very shadow he spends his life escaping. Jung wrote that what we resist persists. A man ray persists his own shadow, but when faced with feminine mystery, he cannot escape it. She becomes both his desire and his mirror, and in that reflection, he is undone. Understand this. Obsession is born not from satisfaction, but from deprivation. The woman who explains herself, who rushes to clarify, who gives him the comfort of certainty, she soothes his wounds for a moment, but soon becomes forgettable. It is the woman who withholds, who allows him to writhe in the tension of uncertainty, who becomes unforgettable. She does not soothe his fear of loss, she magnifies it. And the more he fears, the tighter he clings. You may think this cruel, but cruelty is not the right word. It is nature. Every predator is addicted not to what it already holds, but to what constantly eludes. The deer that escapes becomes the obsession of the hunter. The fire that flickers just out of reach draws the hand closer, even when it burns. In the same way, the woman who embodies silence awakens the hunter within a man, not to catch her, but to chase endlessly the part of her that remains untouchable. But here lies the warning. Addiction, by its nature, devours. A man caught in the grip of feminine mystique does not merely desire, he consumes. His psyche burns with projections, his ego trembles under the weight of what he cannot control. Some will turn their longing into reverence, circling her like pilgrims around a shrine. Others will twist their frustration into bitterness, resenting her for the very silence that binds them. A sovereign woman must know the difference. She must see when his obsession deepens into danger, when his hunger turns violent. For mystery awakens not only beauty, but also darkness. The Stoics would counsel detachment. Marcus Aurelius wrote that power lies not in ruling others, but in ruling oneself. A woman who embodies silence must embody this truth. Her mystique is not a game for control. It is an expression of self-command. She is not silent to torment him, but to preserve herself. Her silence is not manipulation, but protection of the sacred core that no one is entitled to consume. In this way, she walks the narrow path between allure and sovereignty. You must remember, the shadow is always hungry. Men seek in women what they refuse to face in themselves. The mother they lost, the acceptance they crave, the redemption they hope to steal. A woman who explains herself endlessly becomes another casualty of his hunger. But the woman who holds her silence reminds him that his healing is not hers to deliver. His shadow belongs to him. His obsession is his mirror, not her burden. And yet, paradoxically, this detachment makes her magnetic. For in refusing to soothe him, she becomes the very thing he cannot escape. His ego begs for clarity, but his soul hungers for mystery. His conscious mind may hate her silence, but his unconscious binds him to it. He circles, returns, lingers, not because she promised him answers, but because she withheld them. She becomes the eternal riddle, the question without resolution, the myth that outlives the woman herself. Think of the great myths. Helen of Troy did not conquer empires with explanation, but with mystery. Cleopatra did not seduce with words alone, but with presence steeped in enigma. The queens of history who linger in memory are not the ones who made themselves easy to read. They are the ones who left behind fragments, contradictions, silence. Their allure is not in their perfection, but in their unknowability. So take this into your bones. Silence is not a void to be filled. It is a crown to be worn. It is not weakness, but sovereignty. It does not make you less, it makes you untouchable. The man addicted to your mystique may circle endlessly, but you are not bound by his hunger. You stand still, and it is he who burns. And in that stillness, you hold the throne. There is a quiet law that governs human desire. What is abundant loses value, and what is withheld grows priceless. Men rarely recognize this truth until they stand before a woman who embodies it. Her silence, her restraint, her refusal to dissolve into availability, all these weave a spell stronger than any words could. He is not addicted to her because she gives too much, but because she gives so little. Scarcity fuels longing, and longing binds deeper than any promise. Jung understood that the psyche is compelled by incompleteness. The anima, the inner feminine, is never fully revealed to the masculine soul. She flickers in dreams, in fleeting encounters, in projections cast upon real women. She is always almost within reach, yet never entirely possessed. When a woman mirrors this archetype through her silence, she becomes the embodiment of the unreachable. A man's conscious mind may rage against it, but his unconscious kneels. He becomes chained not by her actions, but by her refusal to collapse into transparency. The addiction takes root in his shadow. In silence, she awakens the memory of all he has lost, the mother's gaze that vanished, the childhood wound of abandonment, the ache of being unseen. She does not create his hunger, she reveals it. And because he cannot tolerate emptiness, he fills the silence with projection. Every unanswered glance becomes a riddle, every pause a wound, every retreat a scar he cannot ignore. He spirals, not because she has done too much, but because she has done nothing at all. You hearing these words, do you see the paradox? You have been taught to give, to chase, to reassure, to explain until your essence is stripped bare. You have been told that silence is coldness, that mystery is cruelty, that withholding is unkind. But those teachings serve only to tame you, to strip you of the power that mystery offers. Men do not fall to their knees for what is easily known. They kneel before what defies comprehension. The Stoics called this power self-command. Seneca warned of scattering the self into the hands of others. A woman who embodies silence obeys this wisdom. She does not pour herself endlessly into the hollow vessels of unready men. She does not waste her essence explaining herself to ears deafened by ego. She holds back. She guards. She withdraws. And in this restraint, she preserves not only her dignity, but her allure. But silence is not passive. It is an active mirror. When she says nothing, he hears everything. When she withdraws, he feels the absence louder than presence. Her stillness reflects his own fears, his own obsessions, his own lack of mastery. He is not tormented by her silence alone. He is tormented by what her silence reveals about himself, that he is fragile, that he is needy, that he is not in control. And so he clings tighter, not realizing he binds himself with his own chains. There are women who weaponize noise, who scream, argue, plead, thinking that volume will create power. But true power is not found in noise. It is found in refusal. In silence lies sovereignty. The queen does not explain herself to the subjects. The goddess does not beg mortals to believe. The sovereign woman does not rush to prove her value. Her silence proclaims it. Consider the archetypes that linger in myth and history. The oracle who spoke in riddles, never in certainties. The priestess whose silence guarded sacred truths. The femme fatale who vanished into shadows, leaving men forever haunted. These figures endure not because they were generous with answers, but because they refused to dissolve their essence into common understanding. You must understand, men may resent your silence, but they will never forget it. They may curse your mystery, but it will gnaw at them in the quiet hours of the night. They may accuse you of cruelty, but they will replay every moment you withheld, searching for meaning in the emptiness. And this is where addiction lives, not in what you gave, but in what you refuse to give. Yet let this be clear. Silence must not come from weakness, fear, or passivity. It must come from sovereignty. A silence born of insecurity collapses. A silence born of power commands. The difference is everything. If you withdraw to punish, you play a game and risk being trapped in it. But if you withdraw to protect, to preserve, to reign, you stand untouchable. So carry this truth. A man addicted to your mystique is not addicted to you alone. He is addicted to the shadow you awaken within him. And that shadow is infinite. You need not feed it. You need not soothe it. You need only guard your silence, and he will circle endlessly around the flame of your mystery. For the woman who masters silence does not chase, does not beg, does not explain. She reigns. There is a moment, subtle yet unmistakable, when a man realizes he cannot conquer her. He has tried charm, persuasion, anger, and need, but still she remains untouched, wrapped in silence like a shroud. This realization does not free him, it enslaves him further. For the ego cannot tolerate the unsolvable, and she has become exactly that. She is no longer a woman in his mind, but a riddle, a myth, a wound that refuses to close. This is the apex of feminine mystique. She ceases to be merely flesh and becomes archetype. Jung would say she has crossed from personal to transpersonal. She no longer represents herself alone, but the anima, the eternal feminine that inhabits every man's psyche. He does not merely long for her, he longs for the fragment of his soul she awakens. She is both desire and mirror, lover and phantom. And because the unconscious never surrenders its mysteries, he becomes addicted to her presence, addicted even more to her absence. But you must see clearly, this addiction is not about love. Love is rooted in choice, in recognition, in the willingness to see the other as they are. Addiction, by contrast, is hunger born of projection. He sees not who she is, but who he imagines her to be. He clings not to her essence, but to the shadow she reveals in him. And this is why silence is so potent. It leaves space for projection to multiply. The more she withholds, the more he fills the void with fantasies, fears, and longing. He is imprisoned not by her chains, but by his own imagination. You, hearing this now, do not mistake addiction for devotion. A man may orbit endlessly around your mystery, but orbiting is not choosing. His hunger may be real, but hunger alone is not love. If you collapse your sovereignty for the sake of his craving, you will be devoured. The same silence that binds him must protect you. For the danger of feminine mystique is that it draws not only reverence, but also possession, envy, and rage. A sovereign woman knows when to wield silence as a lure, and when to wield it as shield. The Stoics remind us, mastery is not found in bending others, but in bending the self. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Apply this to the realm of desire. You cannot control his projections, his hunger, or his obsession. But you can control whether you let his hunger define you. You can control whether you remain sovereign in silence or collapse into his demands." This is the true seat of feminine power, the refusal to be consumed by the shadows of men. Think of the pattern that repeats across history. The women remembered with awe were not those who revealed themselves fully. They were those who remained partly hidden, partly unknowable. Cleopatra's allure was not in her beauty alone, but in the sense that she knew something men did not. The oracles of Delphi were revered because their words were veiled, never direct. Even the great goddesses of myth, Isis, Hecate, Persephone, were cloaked in secrecy, their power magnified by what they withheld. Mystery is not absence, it is amplification. But let the warning echo here. Silence is sacred only when it is born of sovereignty. If you retreat into silence from fear, you become prey. If you vanish to manipulate, you entangle yourself in the very games you sought to dominate. The true mystique is not strategy, it is essence. It is the quiet knowing that you do not owe your entirety to anyone, that your soul is not a commodity, that your mystery is not for sale. A man addicted to your silence may circle forever, but you are not bound to his orbit. You are the flame, he the moth. You do not chase, you do not descend. You remain still, radiant, untouchable. This is the paradox of power. She who withdraws commands. She who withholds reigns. She who guards her silence becomes eternal in his memory. And so, the path of feminine sovereignty is carved not in noise, but in restraint. Not in explanation, but in mystery. Not in surrender, but in silence. For the woman who knows her worth understands this final truth. The most haunting presence is the one that refuses to be possessed. Every man believes at first that he desires freedom. He boasts of independence, of conquest, of mastery over his world. Yet when confronted with a woman who embodies silence, that illusion collapses. For her silence is not emptiness, it is sovereignty. It radiates a command that no words can match, and within it, he feels both the terror of insignificance and the intoxication of mystery. He becomes a prisoner, chained not by her touch, but by her refusal to yield. This is where dark psychology and Jungian truth intertwine. For in his hunger, he projects the anima, the eternal feminine that lingers in his unconscious, onto her. She is no longer merely herself, but the canvas upon which his psyche paints desire, fear, and longing. Every unanswered glance becomes a riddle. Every silence becomes a labyrinth. The more she withholds, the more he fills the void with fragments of his shadow. And the shadow, once awakened, does not let him go. Addiction deepens not because she pursues him, but because she does not. The woman who remains elusive commands the stage of his mind long after others have faded. She does not compete. She does not explain. She does not bow to his demands. Her silence cuts deeper than words ever could. He is haunted not by what she said, but by what she refused to say. The mind, after all, cannot release what was never resolved. You must see the truth beneath this. Silence is not absence, it is presence magnified. It forces him to sit with himself, to confront his own fractures. And this confrontation terrifies him, for most men live as fugitives from their own shadows. When her silence refuses to soothe, he feels the tremors of abandonment, the raw wound of insignificance, the gnawing hunger of never being enough. And still, he returns. For even in pain, he is bound. The Stoics understood this paradox. Epictetus taught that the man enslaved by desire is not free. He who cannot master his hunger is ruled by it. In this sense, the man addicted to feminine mystique is exposed. He believes he is the pursuer, yet he is pursued by his own shadow. He believes he holds power, yet his obsess. Iron reveals his weakness. His circling is not sovereignty, it is surrender. And what of the woman? She must walk the narrow edge between allure and sovereignty. Her silence is not cruelty for cruelty's sake, nor manipulation disguised as mystery. It is self-possession. She withholds not to torment, but to preserve. She understands that her worth is not measured by how much she reveals, but by how much she refuses to hand over. Her mystery is not a strategy, it is a boundary. You hearing this must awaken to the truth. When you stop explaining, you stop bleeding. When you stop justifying, you stop shrinking. When you stop handing yourself away piece by piece, you become whole again. And in wholeness, you become untouchable. Men may circle, men may crave, men may burn, but they do not own. They cannot. For the sovereign woman belongs to herself. History remembers this archetype. The empress who ruled with silence, her presence heavier than armies. The priestess who guarded the mysteries, never cheapening them with explanation. The femme fatale whose absence was more intoxicating than another's embrace. These women were not adored because they gave endlessly, but because they withheld. Because they understood that mystery is not weakness, it is empire. But the shadow warns us too. A man addicted to silence may tip into rage. What he cannot possess, he may seek to destroy. What he cannot hold, he may try to break. This is the danger of mystery. It awakens not only longing, but also fear. And fear, unmastered, can be violent. The sovereign woman must see this clearly. Her silence is a crown, but also a shield. She does not wield it recklessly, but with wisdom. For the ultimate truth is this: silence frees her, even as it binds him. She rises beyond his hunger, beyond his projections, beyond his fragile need to own. She becomes more than lover, more than figure, she becomes myth. And myths do not beg to be understood. They reign in mystery, eternal and untouchable. So let this echo in your bones. The woman who guards her silence does not chase, does not crumble, does not explain. She endures. She reigns. She becomes the haunting flame that no man can extinguish. There comes a threshold in every woman's journey where she must decide. Will she remain a reflection of his hunger, or will she step into her own sovereignty? This is where the path diverges. The woman who collapses into the addiction of men becomes consumed, first adored, then discarded, her essence dissolved into their shadows. But the woman who rises through silence, who embraces her mystery without apology, becomes untouchable. She ceases to be prey in the endless chase of validation, and becomes the sovereign center of her own empire. Jung spoke of individuation, the process of integrating shadow, of becoming whole unto oneself. For the woman, individuation means reclaiming all that was stolen, her silence, her boundaries, her mystery. It means no longer existing as the mirror of a man's anima projection, but standing as a complete being, both light and dark, both tender and ruthless. She no longer needs to be understood, for she has understood herself. And in this understanding, she is free. The addiction of men is no longer her concern. If they circle, let them circle. If they hunger, let them hunger. If they project, let them project. She does not live to feed the shadows of men. She lives to embody the fullness of her own shadow and light. She lives to reign. You who hear these words, feel the shift. You have carried the weight of over-explaining, of proving, of bleeding yourself into silence not chosen but forced. You have been taught to soothe, to give, to yield until nothing remained. But now you know the truth. Your silence is not weakness. Your mystery is not shame. Your detachment is not cruelty. These are your weapons. These are your crown. The Stoics would call this mastery of self. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that the soul becomes invincible when it needs nothing external to be whole. So it is with you. When you stop chasing love, it chases you. When you stop begging to be seen, you are unforgettable. When you stop explaining, you become myth. Sovereignty is not found in noise, but in restraint. Not in possession, but in freedom. And freedom begins with release. Release the need to be understood. Release the hunger for his approval. Release the weight of his shadow. Let him carry his own wounds. Let him burn in his own obsession. You are not his mother, nor his healer, nor his possession. You are the sovereign fire around which he circles, but which he will never consume. In this release, you are reborn. No longer fractured by the projections of men, no longer deluded by their hunger, you rise whole. You walk not as a wound, but as a force. Not as prey, but as queen. Your silence is no longer reaction, it is command. Your mystery is no longer defense, it is essence. And so the cycle ends. You do not live as the forgotten one, the explained one, the consumed one. You live as the one who endures in memory, who haunts, who reigns. For the final truth is this: the woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.